Hi, everybody, and welcome. We have an amazing show for you today. We're going to learn about the differences between mentoring and sponsoring. Did you ever see My Fair Lady? We're going to speak about My Fair Lady. It was that amazing show that was based on George Bernard Shaw's play, and then Audrey Hepburn was in the movie. I loved it. I bet you did too. And then you're going to ask me, what has My Fair Lady got to do with mentoring and sponsoring? Well, our exceptional women awardees who are our guests today are going to answer what Rex Harrison actually did in that movie. And who do we have with us? Well, we have two amazing women. We have Amy Handlen-Redemick. Amy is the Chief People Officer of Global Logic, who just sold to Hitachi for $9.6 billion. Amy has a big job that is getting even bigger. And with her, we have Judy Schrecker. Judy is the former CFO of Alcoa Global Rolling Products and of Allegheny Technologies, and she is now the Chief Audit Chair on the NASDAQ company ClearSign. And she's an amazing audit chair there. They are very happy to have her. So we have two incredible guests. They know so much about their various specialties and also about mentoring and sponsoring, and I'm happy to have them with us today. So I'm Lorraine Siegel. I'm the founder, chair, and CEO of the Exceptional Women Awardees Foundation, who has awarded both of these amazing women. We founded this foundation in order to enable high-level, high-potential women to reach their dreams. Why do we do that? Well, I never had a sponsor or a mentor. In my early career as a lawyer and then as a CEO of a number of technology and entrepreneurial companies, even as a board director, I didn't have a mentor or a coach. And I wanted to make sure that women who walk the road less traveled, like I have, would be enabled to have a sisterhood of women, a personal board of advisors that would enable them to get support and advice for the rest of their lives. And that's exactly what we've done. And that's why we have this show, in order for you to get to know our exceptional women awardees. And so without further ado, let me welcome Amy and Judy. Welcome, ladies. And I'm going to go straight to you, Amy, and ask you, what is the difference between a mentor and a sponsor?
Well, in my view, the big difference is that a mentor is someone who is there to really help you focus on your career or the priorities that you have in life. There's somebody who holds a mirror up to your face and shows you some things about yourself that you might be uncomfortable seeing, but that can really help you advance in your career and in life. And a sponsor is generally somebody that sort of takes you under their wing and helps to actually advance your career within the organization. And sometimes they're from different parts of the organization.
So you really need both, Amy.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So Judy, have you had both? And what is your experience between the difference of the two?
Thank you, Lorraine. And I'm really honored to be here with you and Amy, two of my favorite people, talking about a topic that I'm extremely passionate about, which is mentoring and sponsorship. I have been lucky to have both. The unique thing about sponsorship is you don't always know that you have that advocate. A sponsor is generally someone who's more senior than yourself. And as Amy said, could be from any part of the organization. But because of a presentation or something that you actually did, they took note and they said, this is someone that we want to advocate for their career. So I know that I've had individuals that have helped me, advocated for me, but I've also been lucky enough to have mentors, which are good listeners who have guided me when I needed someone to just talk to about concerns that I might have had, career or personal. So a mentor covers it all.
So, Judy, when you think about a sponsor, is this somebody you don't know is sponsoring you, or can you ask somebody to sponsor you? How do you make that happen if it's not happening to your knowledge?
Well, I have an expression that says "stand up and stand out," which is for a sponsor, you really have to lean. You've got to take on these challenging assignments where you get the kind of exposure that would have someone more senior than you notice you. And so, can you ask for a sponsor? Well, of course you can. I would tell you that they happen because you've done a body of work which distinguishes you to those individuals. And, somewhere in the back of their minds, you're always sort of fresh in their minds, and then something happens, an opportunity comes up, they're sitting in an HR meeting or not, and somebody says, well, who could we give that assignment to? And that's when the sponsor says, we could give it to Amy. And that's because you've distinguished yourself. So I think asking for it is not going to be as impactful as doing something that distinguished you.
So Amy, you're in a company with, is it 22,000 employees at Global Logic?
Yes.
Okay, and then now with Hitachi, how many would that potentially grow to?
300,000.
Kind of hard to even understand that. It's bigger than most towns. So Amy, I'm sure that there are a lot of people who would love you to be their sponsor. How do you deal with that kind of question?
Well, it depends on the circumstances. I mean, I think sponsorship is something that just happens organically. It's, somebody like Judy was saying, somebody who recognizes your contribution and just, organically becomes your sponsor. I've had people ask me to be their mentor, but nobody's asked me to be their sponsor so much. It was more like, can you help me grow in my career or build out my skill set or help me understand what it's going to take to get your job someday? But I haven't had anyone approach me to be a sponsor specifically.
Well, I've never had a sponsor and actually never had a mentor. So this is all news to me. And I'm sure for many people who are watching, they're trying to understand how they can make this happen. So stand up and stand out, Judy. That's absolutely terrific. So can you give an example? I'll start with you, Judy, and then maybe you, Amy, will follow, of either a mentor or a sponsor and a specific example of what changed in your life after some good advice.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can give you a lot of examples. Some of the companies that when I worked for Alcoa, they actually had a formalized mentoring program. They paired people, they followed up with it. But the real change to my career was in sponsorship. It was an individual that I had worked with tangentially. I didn't work for him directly. Clearly, I had done some things that impressed him. And I never, ever thought, I was in a lot of the staff roles, and I never really thought I would get into a business. And that individual took note of me and, unbeknownst to me, spoke to another higher up that said, I think we need to get Judy in the business. I can feel her, I can see her passion for it. And soon thereafter, they made the offer, and it changed the trajectory of my life. I left Pittsburgh, I moved to Chicago, I've ultimately moved to New York after that. And then that same individual asked me to come and work for him again at the other metals company. So a sponsor, and I would say a mentor too, can change the trajectory of your career and your life.
Amazing. Amy, do you have an example?
Yeah, I was just thinking as Judy was talking about how it can change your career and your life. I actually had one from an unexpected source. So I was working at this company and they pulled me in to help out with a product launch. And it was really fun because I'd never worked on a product before. I'm in human resources. And they said, well, why don't you come in and you can own the training track and really go deep on that. And this gentleman, he was the product manager for this, and he just really liked my work and my contribution. And he said, you're sort of a natural born teacher. You should really, think about going into learning and development. And I actually spent 4 years in learning and development because of that one comment and that one incident. And he really, pushed me in that direction and helped me move within the company as well.
So if I were to summarize, it's really Judy's philosophy of stand up and stand out. In other words, do the best you can in your job, be willing to take on new challenges, and show yourself up as somebody who is willing to learn, willing to be a team player. And then it's a matter of faith, actually. You hope that somebody out there in the company is looking for high quality talent and will actually look out for you. Did I describe that right, Amy, or is there more to it than that?
I think you've got the very good gist of it. Yeah, absolutely.
Good, good. Well, we're going to go to mentoring in a few moments. But before we do that, Amy, you and I and Judy have talked very often about success paths. Could you give us a few notes on that?
Sure. I mean, I think this is really where a lot of focus is going to start to shift. We've talked a lot about career paths in the past, but more and more, you look at the younger generations in the workplace, you look at millennials and Gen Zs, and they're looking for something deeper in their connection with their company. They want a company that aligns to their personal values and one that's really going to invest in them as a human being. And so we talk a lot about success paths, meaning what does success mean to you? It could be different things to different people. In some cases, it may be, I want to spend my time focused on diversity and inclusion initiatives, or I want to volunteer in my community, and I want to grow my career. There's other people that they want to grow their career and stop at a certain point. They don't want to move up the ladder much further than that. And that's okay. Success is different in different people. And so more and more, we're really trying to focus on helping people identify what success looks like for them so that we can craft programs and deliverables for those people to help them meet their needs.
Makes perfect sense. You know, there are people calling in and making comments from all over the world, and later on in the show we'll see some of them come up. So thank you to all of you, and to others who are just listening, make sure to put in a comment or ask a question. We love audience participation. You know, I remember when I was doing some consulting with Ericsson, they used to rotate their employees all around the world. Every year or every 6 months, there would be a discussion about where they could send an employee who was a high potential next. Judy, you were in global companies, both of you are. Judy, did you ever see that happen around you?
Oh, it was an absolute must. In fact, you know, some of the dilemmas that the larger companies would have is that, you know, there were many great performers who weren't geographically mobile. And so where do you get that international experience? Where do you get the kind of experience you need as you climb to the C-suite so that you have a broader perspective on life? And so they absolutely provided me with, while I didn't live overseas, I spent a great deal of time on projects overseas so that I could get the benefit of the breadth of the company and make sure that I don't just think of it as, in the case of Alcoa, when I worked there for most of my years, I was actually working in Pittsburgh. I did have an opportunity to move to Chicago and go to New York, but that is something that large companies deal with all the time. And it's the same with bringing international folks back into the US, just to give that cultural diversity and that perspective of the broadening aspect.
That's great. Amy, I want to hear from you, because now that you've got this incredible expansion of geographies with the Hitachi acquisition, and after you give your answer, we have questions out there, so we'll roll one of them in. But in the meantime, Amy, Japan is obviously a place you're going to visit quite often, I would imagine, in the future.
I hope so, yes. And, you know, I actually did 2 expatriate assignments myself, and it was life-changing. I was very fortunate to work for someone who took me under her wing, and she said, you know, you remind me of myself, and I wish I had more international experience. So when she sent me to live and work overseas, I really had an opportunity to immerse myself in a new culture and new ways of doing business and travel, and that it completely changed the way that I see U.S.-based companies. I could see the challenges working with a U.S.-based company, and it changed the way that I thought about my job as a human resources professional and how I can support employees all over the world. And my organization, like the vast majority of our employees are outside of the US. And so you have to constantly be thinking about the different cultural nuances and ways of doing business and adjust your style accordingly so that you can be the most effective you can be. So I would encourage anyone, if you have an opportunity to take an international assignment, take it. It's life-changing.
So important. Okay, let's roll in that question that just came up and see. It's from Tabassum. Can Amy or Judy speak about someone they've sponsored and successfully grown them in the process? Well, Judy, why don't you go first, then we'll have Amy. Thanks, Tabassum.
I have really always been an advocate for it doesn't need, a sponsor doesn't have to be someone in the C-suite. The example that I'm going to use is an employee that came to work in my organization. I was the CFO at the time, but I really wanted to meet the people in my organization because, you know, it takes a lot in a big organization to sort of bubble up to the top. And I feel that if you're going to be an effective sponsor, you really have to get to know the people who might not otherwise have much exposure to you. And I could tell from the interview, it was a woman, she was a superstar. And so what I did is I didn't so much mentor her, although whenever I was at the location that she was working at, I always spent time with her. I spent time, Alcoa at the time had a very active women's network, so I was always in front of the women for women's network opportunities. And I had my eye on her, and she has done better than she could have ever expected. That gave me a lot of pleasure. I am a lifelong mentor, and anytime I can mentor a sponsor makes me a happier person.
I love that. Absolutely. Well done, Judy. That's marvelous. I hope she's watching the show. Okay, Amy, what about you?
Oh, you know, I feel the same way that Judy does. I just love mentoring other people. It's one of the great joys in my profession. But as far as sponsorship goes, there's one individual that I think about. This was, 20 something years ago, that I just remember meeting this young superstar, and she was just amazing. And it was almost an entry level position. But I could see that potential there, and I was, running around, hitting the drum, saying, "You really got to, tap into this young lady because she's really exceptional." And I can't take credit for her success, but she is a high-ranking executive and has been at several different Silicon Valley-based companies, and I'm so proud of her. Just watching her rise, to be able to see that, but.
Okay, great. There's another question, and we love audience participation, so thank you all who are watching. This is from Michael Young. He says there's a great need for innovation in mentorship as the past year of isolation has limited the socialization of young executives. Michael, I couldn't agree with you more. So how can we mentor and sponsor virtually? Well, we have the answer for you, Michael, because for the last year, that's exactly what we've been doing. So Amy, why don't you address how we at EWA have addressed the mentoring of our amazing exceptional women awardees the last year, and Judy, you too.
Well, I was going to say, it's anything is possible. We adjust, right? And we've adjusted to the Zoom environment. And actually, Judy is my mentor, and we are on FaceTime or just chatting on the phone all the time, plus our regular Zoom calls. And I think we just have figured out how to make the virtual world work. I also think that in this world, we talk a lot about mentoring, but I'm really a big fan of the reverse mentoring as well, which is when you have like a more senior level person get mentored by a younger person who can really help educate them on how the millennials and Gen Zs like to be managed, developed, grown in an organization, but also how they like to use your products. And I think it'd be quite useful, and we can learn a lot from the younger generations.
Oh, that's terrific. And Judy, you have to tell them how many times we've met, right?
I agree. I'm an exceptional women awardee. My cohort launched in April of last year, and I am literally graduating I'm graduating next weekend, and I have never met all but two of my sisters, of my EWA sisters. But in answering Michael's question, I do think the tools of video conferencing, because I mentor in other venues as well. And many times I've never met those people live until we kind of make a plan to try to be in the same place at once. So I would tell you that with the tools of Zoom and Teams and whatever else, you can effectively mentor and have very deep relationships with people that you've never physically met.
I would agree with that, and I think we've kind of perfected that system here. And Michael, to answer your question, which answers, I'm sure, others' questions, we have a very specific template and a structured proprietary metrics-driven process which we use. And I think that that's also important. It can't just be a loose sort of conversation all the time. You have to actually have a structure that you work through. So let's flip this for a moment, ladies, and talk about what does not work in the mentoring area. Presume that it's hybrid, both in person and virtual. So, Amy, what are your thoughts on that?
The one thing that I think really doesn't work is to have a mentor that's in your direct management chain. I think you really need to go outside of your particular organization. That way you really get an unbiased view and perspective. I think you can run into some tricky politics if you have somebody that's in your direct line. So that's always something. And even with reverse mentoring, I would say the same thing, because the other person may not give you the straight truth if they feel like you have influence over their career.
I would imagine so. Judy, what are your thoughts on that?
I would say, I think the main attribute of a great mentor is a listener. Now, I also believe that mentoring is a two-way street. Amy said that I am her mentor, but I learn so much from Amy every time we talk. So it's a unique opportunity for everyone to broaden and learn. And so I would tell you that if you get a mentor who just wants to sort of check the box and say, oh, I'm a mentor, and isn't a good listener, that is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I would agree with you. So I have in my life had non-mentors, people who told me what I couldn't do. And I guess that's, thank goodness, I think beginning to diminish. I'm not sure it's diminishing 100%. But Amy, in your company, and Judy, you too, have you actually set up official structured mentoring programs? And just give me one or two outcomes that you've discovered really work from that, Amy?
Right now we're in building mode, so we're crafting this, and I'm a big fan of the concept of reverse mentoring. I was first introduced to this by Microsoft, actually, at the Grace Hopper celebration. It was an experiment that they had just begun over there, and it was very successful. I want to create a reciprocal mentoring program for Global Logic employees, where you can have a mutual relationship where we have maybe a younger person who can help educate the more senior person on the needs and developmental opportunities of younger people and what they have to contribute, and then that person in turn can be mentored by the more senior person as well.
All right. So, Judy, you have in your cohort and in multiple cohorts now that you serve on our board as well, you've seen across the organization, we are a peer-to-peer mentoring organization. However, there are 5 different generations of women in our organization. And you have had mentoring relationships with women who are much younger than you in different stages of their careers, although they are superstars. It's really a reverse mentoring opportunity. What has been some of the benefits that you have found from one or two of those?
Well, to Amy's point earlier, I love hearing how they approach life. I have 2 wonderful daughters, and many of my mentees have been at my daughter's age, some even younger, but it really kind of helps me to understand how Gen Zs, Gen Y, millennials, how do they think? And in so many cases, it's freeing me from some of what I call the filters of the way I can look at life. And so my mentees teach me so much because they look at it in a trajectory, from A to B that is completely in contrast to the way I look at life. And so I take that technology, they introduce me to technology, the apps that help me run my life. I've got to tell you, I love listening to how they approach life and how they want to manage their careers. So I get a lot out of those relationships.
Amazing. Yeah, it's so valuable. So, we don't have more than about 4 minutes left. And so I want to make sure to just hear a little bit about your journey. So, Amy, how did you get to become the Chief People Officer of Global Logic?
Well, I've always been ambitious since I was a small child. And as soon as I stepped into the profession, I said, I want to be a chief people officer someday. And I just didn't let anything stop me, along the way. I actually tried to make a point of trying different things. So I spent time in staffing. I spent time as a business partner. I was in operations. I was in learning. I said, I want to try everything that I possibly can so that when I do step into that role, I will be able to speak, much more intelligently about the entire function. And, I had a lot of really great sponsors and mentors in my career that really helped me along the way. But I think I also just raise my hand for every interesting project that comes along to try something new.
That's a theme that comes up over and over again. It really is stand up and stand out. Judy, how did you first of all, were you good at numbers your whole life? Were you good at that? How did you get to be a CFO?
It was kind of an accident. I didn't expect to go to be a CFO. And really, to what I mentioned earlier, it really had a lot to do with an individual at the company who said, and for some reason, it's just the way I looked at solving problems. Even when I was in staff functions, I looked at solving problems from the business perspective, not from the headquarters perspective. I was never much for, we're from headquarters and we're here to help. I always wanted to demonstrate that I could, in fact, help them be more successful, whether it was earnings or recruiting, whatever it was. And so I really always focused on that. And I knew the minute I got into a business, that's where my passion was. And I just grew into a business partner, which served me very well.
Amazing. We have lots of questions. Maybe we can put up a very short one to my producer, if you can get that up here. And ladies, give me a very short answer. Deepa wants to know from you, Amy. Oh, this is a long question, but it's an important one. Diversity, equity, inclusion. You have that responsibility. I know you have a very special way of looking at that, Amy. Give us a few notes on that, please.
This is a much longer conversation, but I believe very strongly that we really need to focus on the I in DE&I, which is inclusion. Most companies have some diversity goals and objectives that they're trying to hit by hiring a certain number of women, for example, or promoting. And those are excellent. We absolutely need to continue that. But really, it doesn't matter at the end of the day if your environment is not inclusive, if it's not a place where people can come and grow and thrive and feel like they have a voice and that they can be their authentic selves. So I focus a lot of my efforts on the inclusion factor while also maintaining the goals on the diversity side. And I'm really trying to have a different conversation around diversity and have us really take a look at what is it like to be an African American? What is it like to be a woman in the workplace? How do we listen and learn from those experiences so that we can maybe change some of our behavior and our perceptions along the way?
Oh, that's, that is a whole show. So we'll have to have one of those. We have one more question, and I just have to take it because it's from somebody by the name of Trish Kinane, and she says, does mentoring always work with two positive people, or is it a bit like therapy where you have to find the right fit? Judy, why don't you attack that one?
I think it depends. I think there are really good pairings, and I think there are, the key to it all is if it's not the right pairing for whatever style differences you have, I think you have to speak up and say, you know, I would like to be reassigned. I did have experience where that happened. There's nothing wrong, but I do think that two positive people are very good. It's not a bit like therapy because positive people have their need to sound ideas with anybody. So it doesn't mean you're negative or positive. It just means you've got a sounding board and you've got a trusted advisor.
Absolutely. You know, my producer's telling me that we have people from all over the world have been joining us. And so we want to thank each of you. Thank you, Rhonda. Happy to see you. And lots of folks, Jennifer from Chicago. So we have listeners and viewers who've joined us. Tabassum, thanks for your question. We love that. To all of you, Leslie, thanks for yours from Illinois, not too far from you, Judy. Franny, I appreciate you coming in from Pennsylvania. So thank you all. That's really wonderful. Lisa Zachary, hope all is well with all of you. Kimberly as well from Utah. How wonderful. It's fabulous. Itchel Duarte and Gail Edwards. Wow, I love the fact that so many people are watching us, and from Alma Derricks as well. Thank you so much, everybody. I hate to say goodbye. Franny Weiner, I hope I can get everybody in here, but unfortunately, we're almost out of time. And Papia Gumberland, thanks for joining us. It's just wonderful to see you all here. And to Amy and Judy, thank you for an amazing show. I hope to have both of you back individually and together again. You are a great team. Well, don't fear, everybody. We actually didn't get to the My Fair Lady part, so we'll have to come back to that in detail because that was a lot of fun to talk about. Even briefly, Judy did attack it just a little bit. But we do have another great show coming up for you, and this one is going to be Bob Nelson, Dr. Bob Nelson, who is going to be with us on July the 7th. He has written lots of books. His first one was 1001 Ways to Reward Employees. He has been doing research during this last year and a half. He has come up with amazing research on how to pivot into a hybrid work environment and engage and delight your employees. This is something all of us need to know because nobody yet has the answers. And of course, we want to make sure that you watch our podcast, which this show will become on Amazon, Spotify. If you missed anything, also on Amazon Music and Spotify and all the other podcast channels that you enjoy. And of course, on our YouTube channel. We want you to keep commenting on LinkedIn because that's where we will definitely answer you as well. And thank you so much. Please let me know your answer to this question. Have you ever had a sponsor or a mentor? Send me an email and let me know. Thank you for joining us. See you on the next show. Bye, everybody.